Okay. Welcome, Renee. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I had no idea when I signed up for this race that I would then become the poster girl for it, but thank you. I'll take that as an honour.
Excellent, Renee. Renee, just for the benefit of the few people who might not know about you, we know you, Renee, from your backgrounds in the running and of course the ultra running world. But you're a leading sports and nutrition specialist. I know you've been working in this field for over 20 years, haven't you, Renee? And you've worked with the Olympics, London and Rio, and you've worked with the ballet and Scottish gymnastics and our friends in the Team GB 24-hour squat. So yeah, I mean, what got you into running in the first place, Renee?
Oh, blimey. I would get introduced like that and you're like, oh my God, that's a lot of stuff. But yeah, no, I started running. I suppose I've always been really sporty, as in at school, I was a swimmer. I was one of those annoying swimming kids, went swimming every day of the week, from probably much the age of 5 until I was about 13. So I've always, I suppose that gave me a really good engine, that's what they say, don't they? So it gave me a really good engine. And then I was very much into team sports at school. So I was good at netball, hockey, rounders, and just kind of enjoyed it, really. I started running because it fitted in with life, really. So, and I love being outside. Like my very first trip to the mountains was when I was 17. But even before that, probably age 11, I remember going on a field trip with school and we went to the Peak District. And I was just like, because I grew up in the outskirts of London, like West London. So it was very, very urban. And suddenly I was like taken to the Peak District. Oh my God, there's like green things. It's really beautiful. And I fell in love with it. So I guess I've always had this real affinity for being outdoors, being outside. I get grounded when I'm in the mountains. I like the feeling of just the feet, like that kind of the feeling of like forest trails under your feet and stuff. I just love it. It makes me really happy. It sounds very sad, but it makes me really happy. So I guess I started running about 15 years ago because it fitted in with work and home and I could do it around everything. But didn't really take it very seriously, just enjoyed moving pretty much. Just really liked putting on my trainers and going out and listening to the birds and all that kind of. I was living on a boat at the time, so it was really easy just to get onto the canal and go. So yeah, and I guess from there I did that usual journey that most people do, which is probably do a 10K, then you do a half marathon, then you do a marathon, then you get really frustrated with the marathon because you can't improve your time, and then you go, do you know what, I'll go and do trail because there's no time constraints and no expectations. And I guess that's where I'm at now, is that I love running because it just makes me feel good. And I've also met probably some of my closest friends through running, I think that's it for me. Like, obviously we've not had many races this year, so it's great that you guys are putting on this race. And a couple of weeks ago I raced with Ultra X, and it was just the thing that was the best thing about all of this is that you go into a community that is so accepting of you, and you're all in it together, and you're all really similar. You're all there for a reason, that you just love doing crazy things. And yeah, I don't know, I just love that feeling of being with like-minded individuals, to be honest. I've really missed it this year, so it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it.
It's been tough, hasn't it, with all the race cancellations? Have you has it impacted your sort of professional, the sort of people that you've worked with that have struggled with maybe the sort of structure and discipline of, races and plans?
Yeah, I think the thing that most people I've worked with have found the hardest is this sense of uncertainty about when things will perhaps go back to normal again. And a lot of people have found that really, really hard. But also, it sounds like a real first world problem when you say it, but this sense of loss, like I've lost a year of my life, I've lost a year of my career because I haven't been able to do the things that I had anticipated or expected to do. And that's actually been quite difficult to manage for some people. And in some cases it has caused, I suppose, worrying relationships with training and things, because people have just felt like, I can't handle what's going on, and the only way I can handle it is to keep running and to keep running away. And so, you know, some of the people I've worked with have ended up with injuries, which just through overtraining too much, or under recovery, should we say, rather than overtraining. But people are learning now. Like, people are definitely starting to see that, you know, it's been an incredibly strange year, and we're not out of the woods yet, sadly. And we may have a few more months where it's a bit bumpy, but I think hopefully we're all learning to adapt. And like I said, these little nuggets of the odd races that can go ahead, I think they really help to lift people's moods, because it gives them something to look forward to, and a sense, like I said, that sense of community, that you're doing something for you.
Yeah. I mean, we're chuffed to bits, Renee, that you're taking part in our event. How is your own personal training?
Well,
what can your coach let us know?
No, so my training is actually really good at the moment, because obviously I only signed up with you guys a few weeks ago, and I'd already been training for Ultra X, the sort of Ultra X England, but I did the 50k. So obviously still the same distance, but a very different race, because it was like 1900 meters of elevation, so quite different to what we're going to be doing in Lea Valley. But still, I like the challenge. So yeah, when I spoke to Damien, who's my coach, I said, so I have just signed up for another race. And he looked at me, he's like, I thought there were going to be no more this year, Renee. I was like, no, I know, but you know, it'll be fun. It'll be, and he goes, what is it? And he goes, right. So we now need to change complete focus from hills to speed. I was like, yeah, but surely that can't be that difficult. Because you've got 7 weeks, Renee. I was like, yeah, I know, but we can do it. It's fine. So yeah, this morning was my first session back after Ultra X England. I'm not gonna lie, it was tough, but speed is definitely not my strong point, so don't expect any record breaking times from me at all in 7 weeks time. But I'm just looking forward to the fact that it's a bit different. You know, it's good, I think, to challenge the body. I think it's good not to get stuck in a rut, and also not to get stuck in I suppose in a kind of bubble or an identity that this is all you do. I think like Ali Young, who is obviously one of the GB 24-hour runners, and I love her training, and I love her attitude, because she will do park runs through to the 24 hours, and she is one of the she's one of the best athletes I've ever worked with, in her ability to be adaptable and her ability to change and just be resilient and strong through whatever she does. I find that incredibly inspiring. And so yeah, I think like learning from the people I work with, it's really nice to be able to change things up, and I think everybody should do it. And I think you can only do that if you also are compassionate towards yourself, because I'm under no illusions. 50k, the race I'm going to do with you guys, I will perform very differently to how I did a couple of weeks ago. The peaks is much more my comfort zone. I am much happier when I'm in the hills. I'm good at running downhill. Like it's my strength. Running flat is not my strength. So I have no massive expectations of myself except to finish with a smile on my face, and that is it. And I'll hold you guys to making sure that I do that. So, but I think it's being able to do that is also really important, particularly if you're new to running. Just setting yourself realistic targets. You know, you're not going to smash it out the first time you race, and you're probably not going to get a PB every time you race either. And it's kind of understanding that and enjoying the process along the way, making friends. I think that's the important bit.
Yeah, it's amazing advice. We're huge fans of Ali as well. Love Ali. That kind of leads me nicely onto a question. So Rennie, we have a lot of people that have told us this is their first ever ultra marathon, and I think there's a sort of a genuine worry about undertraining. I wonder if what your thoughts are you know, advice wise, in terms of people that may feel that, you know, through the virus and the current period, that they're perhaps not doing enough?
I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is thinking that you have to cover the distance that you're going to race. And actually you don't. Like, I've never covered the distance I'm going to race in whatever race I'm going to do, because actually it takes quite a lot of recovery after, you know, like if you're running 50k every weekend and then you're going to race it 6 weeks later, that you're not going to recover and you're not going to be at your best when you start on the start line. So yeah. I think, like, generally speaking, if you have done a marathon, then 50k is, you know, it's 8k more, so you'll probably be fine, and it's more mind over matter than it is anything else. If you've only done a half marathon, you've still got 7 weeks to build up a little bit more training. I would say definitely try and get up to at least 1 or 2 longer runs, where it's not necessarily the mileage, but more about the time on your feet is the thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, we're all runners, and it's that, isn't it? It's the mechanics of the body that tend to be the thing that then let you down, and then they affect the mind, and then you go, oh, I can't do this because it hurts or whatever. Whereas, and something Damien said to me before Ultra X England was, he said, Renee, you have done everything you need to do to complete this race, but the bit that always lets you down is your belief in yourself. And it's because I don't actually race that often, so it's not something that I you know, a lot of people will race all the time, but I actually don't race that often. And he said, but we know you can do it. And I guess that's the message I'm going to say to everybody else, is that actually it is just confidence. It's like, if you've done a few longer miles, if you've been on your feet for sort of, you know, 4 hours plus, you know you can do it. It's and it's being able to remember to kind of home in on that when you on race day. So I think try not to panic, try not to go off too fast, try not to set yourself unrealistic targets, and don't forget to fuel and hydrate, because that is going to be quite an important part of keeping you to the end.
Yeah. And what sort of level of kind of calories would you expect a runner to be taking in on a 50k?
So I guess it does depend on kind of where you're at in the field. So for somebody who's going to race it and maybe has been practicing running at a certain intensity and a certain pace because they know they want to finish within a certain time, then they're probably going to use a much higher percentage of carbohydrate than any other fuel. So for those individuals, I'd definitely saying you kind of need to be aiming for around 60 to 90 grams of carbs an hour, and you should be practicing that now in your training. I don't think you can just do it on the race day, because your body needs to learn to tolerate that. So you need to train the gut to do that. If you're gonna, obviously, you're just going to have a really nice day out, and maybe you're not working at that high intensity for you, as in it's all relative depending on you as an individual. But let's say you're going to jog it around and you're just going to have some fun, and you just want to see if you can actually cover the distance. You still need to be very mindful of how much you're taking on. And I would still aim for, you know, somewhere between 30 and 60 grams of carbs an hour, and just keeping on top of that. Everybody's just different. Like, you know, I was doing actually my calculations from a couple of weeks ago, and in the peaks, I managed to hit about 50 to 60 grams of carbs an hour, which is actually really good for me. And it's because I've been practicing my nutrition a lot with my longer runs. And I think that's...
sorry to interrupt, Renee. Just to give kind of example then. So that's a science in sport gel.
Yeah.
How many
20
how many grams? Other gels are available.
Yes.
Other gels are available.
Yes, other gels are available. I like to, if that helps.
Yeah, I probably got some in the box as well. Oh, actually, there's another one. There's a goo. So would those be kind of the same kind of thing? 20 grams?
They're roughly around, they're usually somewhere between 20 and 22 grams of carbs, generally.
Right.
And obviously,
so it's quite a significant amount of gels, isn't it? It's like, ooh.
About 3 an hour.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is why when you're doing longer stuff, you need to start thinking about how you're going to get that in. So it's not going to be like, you're not going to get that taste fatigue. You're not going to get that, you know, that kind of feeling of being sick because it's just too much sweet stuff. So, I mean, I mix things up. I really like using a drink. So I've been known to use things like SIS beta fuel or active root is one of my favorites. I really like the ginger. So I tend to use that quite a lot, because I then know that I'm getting a certain amount through my drinking and like my bottles, as well as then taking on additional things. I love jelly tots when I'm racing. So I tend to always have jelly tots when I'm racing. And in the peaks, I also had a Snickers bar. So, you know, like whatever works for you, really. But I guess the faster you're going, the more you're going to want digestible for fuel. So that's where things like the gel and the drinks are really good, because they're very quick. They go into the body very, very fast. Obviously, a lot of the races I do, we're hiking quite a bit. We're going up mountains. We're sort of stopping and looking at the view. So I can actually eat real food, which is another reason why I like them, because you get to have a picnic on the way, basically. With your race, I'm not sure yet what my strategy is going to be. I'm going to have to practice some different things. I'm not sure I can eat and run at a fairly decent pace without making myself like choke, but I'm going to practice. So the jelly tots will definitely feature, without a doubt, no doubt.
We'll make sure there's some on the aid station tables.
Excellent. Brilliant.
Perfect. Actually, sorry, it just occurred to me as you were talking about the gel. So how long does it take from consumption to sort of energy availability for something like that?
Pretty much instant, because it's
really?
Yeah, so that's the good thing about these gels, is they tend to be obviously a combination of glucose and fructose. So it's a good mix of the two types of sugar that our body can utilize. One thing I would say though is, especially if you're new to gels, I would consume my gel over the course of about 4 minutes, roughly. So yeah, I say 4 minutes, but I would usually take about a K, whatever my K is. I would probably take a K to drink, to have a gel, because if you are slightly dehydrated, which you may well be when you've been running, obviously November, could be cold, could be nice, we don't know, it could be anything, could be pouring down with rain, we'll have to wait and see. But obviously if you're a bit dehydrated and then you put something that kind of concentrated into your stomach, and like instantly, that is obviously when a lot of the gastrointestinal issues occur. That's when people start to feel uncomfortable. That might be when they get a bit sick. So if you can actually just take it really slowly over the course of, say, a K and a half, you will actually find that you absorb it much better and you don't get that discomfort, which is a big tip that it's never written on the packets. So that's a professional tip there for you guys.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's not on the packet, I can confirm.
You mentioned the weather, Renee. I mean, obviously November, as you said, anything could happen. I mean, how might that influence things? You know, if it was, say, bitterly cold, I mean, would taking a warm drink, or would that work, or would that be like less advisable?
Well, I'm hoping that I'll be able to just sit in Darren's van till it's
yep, no worries.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously being cold does mean you're going to use a lot more energy. So if you are at the start, you need to keep really warm. I mean, I did Bath Half 2 years ago and it was freezing. It's in March, but it was absolutely freezing. And what I did was I actually took a load of old clothes, and I don't know if it's something we could maybe do. I took a load of old clothes that, because one of the charities in Bath said they would pick up anything old and then put them in, put them forward for charity. So I did that in the end. I just wore some old jumpers and things just so I could keep really, really warm. So that's one thing I'd definitely say, is try and keep warm, because obviously if your muscles are cold, you're more like, especially go out hard, you're more likely to pick up an injury within the first mile. So don't do that. You will probably need a little bit more energy if you're cold and you're anxious. So often people will have like their patterns planned out. So they might, like, they'll have, for me, like my race day breakfast is usually like a bagel with peanut butter and banana. And I know that works for me, but I also am very aware that if I say have that at 7 and the time of the race starts at 10, normally I'd be fine, because I'd be sat here on my computer, whatever, doing things, and I'd just be like, all right, I'm going to go out for my run now. But obviously in race day, you've got the anticipation, you've got the nervousness, you've got the excitement, and you've got the cold potentially. So you'll use a lot more energy. So it may be that you need to top that up, like, an hour from the start or half an hour from the start. And that could be, like you said, it could be that you can have a warm drink of some description. I probably wouldn't have a milky drink, because it might feel a bit heavy on the stomach, I will always finish with usually a mocha is kind of my go-to to finish, and then a beer usually, but you know, recover first, then have the beer. But yeah, I would say like it might be that you want to keep like warm. Again, if you don't normally use things like coffee and stuff, just be mindful of that. Or if you're thinking ahead and you know what you need, or it might just be that you have hot water. You know, when I was in Nepal 2 years ago, it was always cold. Like obviously we're in the mountains, in the Himalayas, and we were up very high. And I got really used to, I had like one of the, you know, those kind of bottles that keep hot water in, and they keep it hot. And just basically you'd get in and they'd have loads of hot water boiling, and you would pour it in and you would just drink hot water, because it was a good way of rehydrating, but also staying warm. So yeah, I mean, definitely be mindful. So once you start running, you'll be fine. In terms of like kit, one tip I would say for people is, if you're listening to this and you've got the opportunity, I wear arm warmers, because I always get so hot when I start running, and I'm always freezing at the start. But I find that if I wear arm warmers, then I can just fold them down, and then you're not like trying to take off your pack or trying to like take a top off, and you don't know where to put your number. And these are all things that obviously when you've raced a few times and you know you've got used to, and they don't cause you anxiety. But if you're new to racing, these are all the things that I know I'd be lying there the night before going, but what about where will I put my number, and how do I take my top off, and how do these would be things I would be panicking about. So hopefully I can help people and realize that you can just sort it out beforehand and it's all good.
Amazing. Excellent, Renee. That's amazing. Daz, any final questions, buddy?
Oh God, I could ask so many questions. There's one thing that I've got to ask this. So I am sort of, you touched a little bit on it earlier when you talked about fuel sources for our bodies. So I'm fascinated by the idea of, let me get this the right way around, low carb, high fat, and or I guess keto. Where do you like? Is that actually really a thing? Does it work for people, or
how long have you got?
Wow, how long have you got? Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, because it's kind of, I guess in my mind, it's unachievable for me because I like carbs too much. But it's potentially the ultra running nirvana, I guess, if you can achieve that kind of state.
So if I give you the facts first, and we can talk about individuality. I mean, I'm not a big promoter of low carb. In fact, I'm not a promoter at all of low carb, high fat. I don't agree with it, and I don't encourage it at all, mainly because I see the negative consequences, and I'll talk about those in a sec. But I think the reason it became so popular was because there's this kind of belief that if you take carbs out of your diet, then your body has to find another source of fuel, and so it will use fat, because we've got this big source of fat in our body that it can use, and so you've got this huge amount of energy that you can tap into. And so it's very simplistic, and you take carbs out and then you're going to use fat, so you're going to get really good at using fat for fuel, and that's what you're going to burn, and so it's much better for you, and you don't have the spikes in terms of your blood sugars moving up and down.
Mm-hmm.
But the body's not simplistic, and this is where I get a bit frustrated, because you know, if you look at the human body, it is a series of biological processes that all work together, and they all interact, and they're all based on feedback loops. So if you just go back to your like GCSE biology, you'll remember things like, you know, the body will work out when it's hot or when it's cold, and it will adjust things in the body to help you maintain a temperature. So we know the body is very finely controlled and does amazing things. So if you take out something like carbohydrate, yes, it would seem like that you would automatically use fat for fuel. Mm-hmm. But realistically, the body needs carbohydrate to burn fat anyway. So it's not as simple as that. Also, when you break down fat for fuel, it's much, much slower. So you can go for longer potentially, but you can't go fast. So you do have to keep your heart rate quite low to be able to stay that and use that. If you try and go fast, you're going to basically just hit a wall and feel like rubbish. But I always ask the question, why? Like, why would you remove a food group from your diet when we know that the body's preferred currency is glucose, which you get from carbohydrate? Carbohydrate also provides us with so much more than just fuel, as in, if you think about your whole grains and your starchy components, like there's B vitamins in there, there's fiber in there, there's zinc, and all these, there's iron, there's all these minerals and things that are really important for the body as well. So not only removing carbohydrate, you remove sources of things that you probably also need. But the critical thing for me is that, so obviously, as you said, our body is amazing, and the bit in the brain that controls everything is the hypothalamus. And so we have this hypothalamus pituitary axis, which is what controls every single biological process in the body, every single one. So if that doesn't work, if that doesn't switch on, then that means things like digestion get affected, your immune system gets affected, your hormonal system gets affected, your cardiovascular system gets affected, everything gets affected. And we know from studies, we know from like textbooks, from physiology, that the hypothalamic pituitary axis needs carbohydrate. When there's not enough carbohydrate in the body, it can't switch on, it can't switch on. So those things become affected. And it's something that I have seen in my clinic, where individuals have tried to go low carb, high fat. It might work for 6 months, maybe 12 months if you're lucky, but then you get into the post 12 months, and often they're coming in with recurring injuries. They're finding that they're not able to perform consistently. They may find they've got digestion issues. They might notice that they're not improving, because the one thing to remember is that we adapt from our training only when we produce growth hormone after we've trained. And you're only going to produce growth hormone if all your hormonal system is working well. So, in guys, we want testosterone levels to be normal, and women, we want estrogen levels to be normal. And one thing that we do know, particularly for females, is a low carbohydrate diet can be the cause of hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is when you lose your period. And obviously, when you lose your period, that means your estrogen goes down, and that can have negative consequences on your bone health, but also then on the fact that you just don't adapt to your training. So it's, as you can see, it's really complex. Like there's so much going on. So I know people swear by it. I know there are some big names out there that swear by it. There's always going to be outliers. There are always going to be people that maybe genetically they are predisposed and they can get away with it. But I would say, like, the majority of people that come to my clinic who have tried it, and there's a lot of people and a lot of athletes and runners in particular, it doesn't work. It's actually really bad for you. So it's not something I advocate. And one thing to say is that if you're an endurance runner, so you always run miles anyway, like you're running decent amount of miles, your body actually becomes very good at using fat for fuel anyway. So all three of us probably have a much higher, we probably use a higher percentage of fat when we're running than, say, somebody who's just starting out or somebody who doesn't do any running, because our bodies have already become adapted from the training that we do, whether we eat carbs or we don't eat carbs. And I'm with you, I could not give up carbs. I am a carb monster, so definitely needed.
Yeah, I'm not giving up pizza anytime soon, that's for sure.
No, or potatoes, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or bread. Or bacon. Bread. Yeah, I mean, you name it, basically.
Excellent, that's fascinating. Thanks, Renee.
No worries at all. It's quite a lot of science there, so obviously, But yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that sometimes sports science and sports nutrition is really dumbed down and simplified, and we have to remember that human beings are not simple. We're quite complex, and what we do to ourselves physically will always have an impact with us emotionally as well. And I think it's understanding that it all ties in together. And I guess that's where my approach to nutrition and performance is a little bit different, say, to other people, because I see the person as a whole and I look at all the aspects of their life, not just what their performance is, or what it is that they want to achieve from a performance point of view.
Brilliant. Renee, thank you so much for your time.
No worries. It's been fun. Like I said, it's been it's an absolute pleasure to finally meet you guys, because I've followed you on Facebook for ages, and I've known about you guys, and obviously we sort of briefly met in Albi, kind of. But you were a bit tired, understandably. So was I, but I just been crewing. And so it's really great to finally meet you guys properly, and then see you properly in a few weeks' time.
Brilliant. And
Absolutely.
with the speed training, really.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll see. I haven't had any feedback yet. So I'm waiting for feedback. I did send him a message going, I hate you this morning. So, you know, we'll see what he says back.
He can take it.
Yeah, no, he's great. No, he's very, very cool. I feel very lucky that I have him as a coach, and he's very good at listening. So I will say to him, no, Damien, like, have you seen my working week? We can't do that this week. And he's great. He'll just move things around and make it work for me. So yeah, he's really good.
Maybe he could come and work an aid station for us.
I'll ask him. He'll throw jelly babies at me.
Brilliant.
Ultra running royalty on the Lea Valley.
Yeah, we could. I'm sure we could get Ali there. I'm sure we could.
Yeah,
fact,
that would be incredible. Dan and Charlotte are coming, hopefully.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I will. Well, Ali's coming to stay next weekend, so I'll ask her.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
Perfect. That'd be great.
Cool.
Excellent.
You
Thank you so much.
No worries. No, really, really cool to meet you guys.